Hello, hi everyone. This is Caroline Michelasu, Director of Operations and Customer Success with Alloyed Automation. Um, so Ryan, who is supposed to be hosting this session together with me as well, doesn't seem to be on the line today. So just want to check with the audience. Are you able to hear me fine? Everything? If yes, would you be able to just type a message in the chat just to let me know that you can hear me fine? Right. So well, since I'm not able to see whether anyone is able to hear me fine, I should just go ahead with my presentation for today, or rather my sharing session for today. Oh, great, great. That's great to hear some feedback there. Like customer success, we always love to hear feedback from the audience, right? So once again, thanks for joining me for this session. And I know that I've chosen a very controversial topic of who owns user-centric advocacy, right, and how. So what I'll share is actually based on my own experience. And I know that every organization is in different stages of maturity. So it's meant to be a sharing session, a discussion. So feel free to drop a note, a line to share your questions, and I'll take on the questions at the end of the session if time allows us to. And a bit of a background about myself. So I've been in the corporate world for about 15 years and come from a very diverse background. Started my career with 6 years in marketing. And before I joined account management with GFK in the market research and went on to advisory firms like Frontier View and Gartner before moving on to a SaaS company that I'm now with called Alloyed Automation. So you can see that it's a very diverse like background, and I've been able to see the evolution, right, of how we pick up from customer service to account management to what we now known as customer success, but even that is still evolving. So I would say that my top three career challenges, right? Because when we graduated from school, we are kind of like a know-it-all, right? Because we've like learned so much from the great lecturers, books that we have come across and taught that we know everything that we need to know. But the thing is that I've been challenged throughout my whole professional career about how do I shape and reshape my perspectives, right, on customer success. And this is an ongoing process because things are really still evolving and that defining, right, what is value from the customers and stakeholders perspective. Because when we first started, like in my career, everything was more of a, well, what do we push the clients? How do we create that push and pull? But there was very little known about what is that pull factor and more of that push factor. So in that sense, it's a lot of redefining what value is, and I'll talk a little bit more about it later on. And also, third and the most important, I would say that is listening to influence and be influenced wisely. Why would I say that? Is because a lot of time we come with our own mindsets, right, and perspectives, and it's very hard to change, especially our seniors and so forth. But even the younger generation, we have a certain way of thinking, and we hardly pause to just listen. And we've been taught in customer success, right, that one of the greatest strength for us is actually to listen smartly and wisely, and also to be influenced wisely, right? Because we want to absorb the great knowledge and the great practices that we see from our peers, from seniors, even from juniors as well. So the whole ecosystem, right, is just a space for us to learn and interact from. And that ability to have this permeable membrane, right, for us to exchange those thoughts and information, I would say that that is actually one of the key essential ingredient, right, in my success as a professional. So where does this actually lead us in this conversation, coming from this diverse background and this ability to have these great learnings in the career profession? So where I want to touch on is, and we'll come to user centricity in just a minute. But before we go into that, right, I want to take a step back and look at that whole rise of SaaS and customer success, because in the past, we don't really hear about it like a decade ago, right? Especially out here in APAC region. And what we see is that as business models are evolving from KPACs to OPACs, we are going on subscription basis in our daily life. We have Netflix, we have different kind of subscriptions, even your mobile phones, etc. So we talk about more about like how is it like to retain our customers. So what are those drivers and the necessary metrics that we need to put in place? So marketing, and sales is no longer just the stars and the heroes, because after the clients come on board, how do we actually manage this relationship and get advocacy and have them renew and expand the account together with us? So customer success managers, these days we are thrown at with so many different kind of metrics. And here on the illustration, it's just some basic fundamentals that we see and hear day in and out. But have you ever questioned, just pause and question, what's the basis and rationale for these metrics? Like, are we doing these metrics for the sake of doing it? Like, which metrics would actually hold a higher percentile? And what matters most to the clients at the end of the day, right? So this is where we need to actually look at the rationale of what is the drivers and where is it pushing us towards. And I started to ponder upon the North Star, the basis. And in my previous professions over at Gartner, over at advisory space, even I would say that the fundamental learning on account management and that finding of the North Star actually started with my days at GFK, where I was handling the Samsung key account for the APAC region. Because Samsung is known to be a very, very demanding client, right? And for their CMI team, which is a consumer marketing intelligence team out here in the region, we manage the relationship with them. And one of the very straightforward questions they always ask is, well, what is it, why, and how, and so what does it mean to us? They were very clear. They want to know the value, right? Like, how does the reports drive value for us? What should we do with the data? So it started to get us thinking that we should actually really understand what is the rationale for them asking these questions, because they're not buying our products and services for the sake of buying it, right? They want it to enable some kind of value, but what is that value and expectations for them? And while working together with them, it also come up with other questions of, they have this single sign-on entity platform that we have to integrate our data to that every user can the data. So we kind of understand the path of how they're actually utilizing the data. And even the template, the format that we send the data over, that actually has created some tension, because if the data structure wasn't in a good condition, it can't be loaded into their database and into the single sign-on system easily. So all these questions started popping up, and we try to understand like how to enable us, right, to allow them to use it more, and all these questions really came up. And however, all the organizations were still talking about, are you meeting the client? Are you having, how many reports are they downloading? How many meetings have you had on a monthly basis? Have you, craft out a success plan for them? So these are the kind of common metrics I have come across in my professions in the previous organizations. But then there is one concept that started to really clinch on and sunk in me. And that's the concept of user centricity, right? Really understanding that, could that be the North Star, right? Because when we want to have a basis for the engagement, to have a philosophy so that everything would have, be streamlined, so that when we're having conversations with product team, with sales team, with marketing team, it's all about like, how do we actually glue our product into how they are working, and also to look at the amount of effort they have to spend with us on our product. Because according to one of the Gartner webinars as well on customer service essentials, there is the top key question of, how do we retain clients' loyalty with us? Do we make them happy? And they found that results found that they would reach a certain like just a ceiling where the client couldn't go happier, because we keep on expecting that client would be, the more happier, the more we do, they'll be more happier and all that. But actually, no, it actually plateaued. And what is actually one of the key driving factors that allow the clients to actually stay with us to discourage this loyalty is actually the effort, the amount of effort they have to put in with our service, with our product. So does it come as a shocking finding for everyone? I don't think so. But the fact of it is that we have not quite been getting used to the idea of, oh, okay, so we need to minimize effort for them. But in customer success, like usually effort and using the product, it's from the product development team, right? That's coming from how to reorganize the product, maybe the dashboard, the UI, etc. And for that, it's like, okay, we think that product team should have the ownership, but what about customer success? Do we collaborate it with them? So I become a believer in that low effort experience. And because of that, we talk about it during our panel discussion yesterday as well about product-led growth with customer success. And we talk about how it's a collaboration between customer success and product team to find that right balance and mix to minimize the effort for the clients. So while when I look at new concepts, right, of course, I need to become a believer in that. I need to test logic. And that's where I started looking at the published literature, one of which is the webinar, personal observations as well. And while we are engaging with our clients on the current sales product, SaaS product, so one of the observations was the client would actually give us feedback of how to minimize the number of actions required for him in order to change a certain function or feature on the dashboard. Because our UI didn't really think about that, right, initially. And that was where the customer said, I want something that's low effort for me. So it validated the idea that this concept that user centricity, a lot of it is about the low effort experience so that to get maximum value out of it. And with that, we see a difference in the customer journey mapping perspective that we want to simplify the approaches and we want to envision clearer, simplified outcomes. So that's all fine and good, right? And it's a lot generation, idea generation from customer success, but the organization isn't on the same page yet. And I would say that for most of us, that's the truth. Most of our organizations would not be on this same journey with us yet. And so coming back to the alloy automation journey, right? And being a startup going to scale up where we are in the automation business or using AI, it sounds very fancy, right? It's like digital native. And a lot of people have a misconception that digital native means that they are good with user experience, customer experience, and they are user-centric from day one. Well, sad to say, it's not exactly the truth. So we have yet to instill like user centricity into our metrics, but we have started user-centric conversations to revolutionize the way we work. And so it's a lot about that growth mindset, the power of yet. And why do I say this is because one of the things that we need as a fundamental basis is that the organization needs to be open to the idea. So even while we look at Alloy's journey, right, the company was founded in Q4 2019. We participated in Slingshot 2019 and went into prototyping, MVPs, and towards commercialization in 2021. So it was only in Q3 2021 that senior hires for customer success and marketing came on board. So you can see that the focal point has not been on user centricity from day one. It's more of like, okay, I have a great idea. I need more R&D. I need to like make sure we have MVP and prototype. So the focal point was that. So right now, what we are trying to do is actually to pivot. And how do we actually encourage pivoting? And that's where in Q3 2021, when I first joined the company with Alloy, it's really to identify quick wins, because when we talk to the other departments, right, when we talk about user centricity or even just broadly customer experience, well, the other departments would just say probably, maybe it's not in my department, I'm just going to focus on my product, just making sure that it works. IT would say, I just want to make sure that things work. And then marketing would say, I'm just going to do like social media announcements, etc. Just tell me when you have a case studies or a testimony from the client. And so this could be one of the reaction. And if we are fortunate, there will be departments who would say, well, that actually sounds like a really great idea, and I'm hearing it from other organizations, other peers in the industry, but I don't really know how. How do we go about doing this, right? So that's a part where who would be the best person to take up ownership of this user-centric advocacy? I'm not even talking about ownership of metrics yet, because if we don't advocate and enlighten and bring about awareness, there can't be metrics, right? We need to know what we are in for and get that buy-in within the organization before we can roll out metrics. Otherwise, it just doesn't work. As we've seen with clients, deployment of solutions and etc., that requires change management. If we don't manage that properly, it wouldn't fly, it wouldn't take off. So what I realized is that customer success is actually like engaging with multiple departments as we can see here. So in our organization, customer success is part of the commercial department. So I report to our chief commercial officer. And with that, under my domain, I also have operations at the commercial realm that's within my jurisdiction. So we also see that we engage regularly with product, with marketing, with IT department, with R&D. So all this is actually the whole ecosystem, like it's like customer success is quite at the heart of it all to ensure that the product is working, to make sure that we are escalating, to make sure that we are looking out for the client's interests. So who best to actually advocate it if the other departments do not have awareness of it? And that's where I started looking out for collaborators, right? Like, can I influence and collaborate with the other departments so that they can be on this journey together with me and life will be easier after I get that buy-in? And what went through is that I've put it in 3 pillars, but of course we can branch out more and talk a bit more about what you guys are also doing on the grounds. But how I went about doing it is that I need to actually bring them onto this vision and rationale first, because that's what I always believe in. It's always a two-way street and dialogue when we are trying to sell in an idea. And of course, when you're selling in an idea, you need to have structure, you need to have governance, you need to have process and education and awareness. So you can imagine that what is my first step, right? The first step is to look at how can I influence in my daily and weekly engagements. Because as we can see earlier on, I've seen how I am interacting, my team is interacting with the various departments. It's a chance for us to influence. So I'm going to draw in an assumption here to say that most of the time we are not proactively thinking about how can we influence. But so this is an opportunity for us to actually think about the daily and weekly engagements as opportunities. And taking an example, just in case that for illustration, is how we interact with the product team. Because when we talk about user centricity, right, the first quick impact to the business, the fastest win would be the product, right? Because for us, user centricity on how we actually advise on the product usability is on the CS side. But we can only influence so much as to how they utilize the tool. But if the tool doesn't improve, then there would be a lot of restrictions. So we need to constantly engage and influence the team that is producing the product. So what we do is that we don't assume that product team knows what's best, because oftentimes they have developers, they are in the product production of like which features go on the dashboard, etc., but they do not have direct access to the customers. And unless we are an organization that has very rich resources to do customer journey mapping all the time and projects and research, the very fundamental basis, the sources of information is going to come from customer success. So on a weekly basis, my team engaged with the product improvement manager to talk about what are the features of priorities for quality assurance, for enhancement, and we track it together on OneDrive and on Jira board so that we make sure that there's ownership and responsibility after we have collaborated with them on what to work on. So it's that ownership, right? Now that we have, say, this piece, this is what we need to ensure that the customer is getting value. These are the top priorities for the clients. So that's where they will take it on board on their side and becomes a collaboration for them to get onto the task. So that's on the daily and weekly engagements. And to ensure that we are actually getting a wider organization buy-in, that is where I had set up this monthly customer experience discussion. And you might be wondering, so what does a customer experience discussions looks like? It sounds so fancy, right? But actually, no, it's not. It's more of like identifying what are the key gaps that customer are not able to derive good value or experiences from our engagement in our products, highlight that, and also to share with the team what are the work in progress and to share success case studies so that we are propagating the right mindset. And the audience is actually top management, all the C-suites, the respective head of departments, key stakeholders, and it involves not just commercial people, but also legal. You might be like wondering why, but because what we've heard as well when we are engaging with different stakeholders internally is that when we are doing our own way of work, commercializing the product, especially for a startup going to scale up, the way that we work would be also factored into the commercial terms that legal is producing. So without understanding like the commercial terms, the payment terms, etc., that clients is asking for, legal wouldn't quite be able to be on the same page and they would be in their own world. So they actually requested to be part of this conversation to just understand what's going on. And also learning and administration, which is the team that is producing all the learning materials for newcomers, is also part of this monthly customer experience discussions. And that's how we shift into how do we actually change our way of work. Because the customer experience discussion is to educate about how we are working together with product, how we want to build that whole customer centricity mindset, user centricity mindset, and go into changing our way of work. So that's where on operations side, we look at the tools that we have. We look at Salesforce, we look at OneDrive, Jira, and the various ways that we're working and corresponding on these platforms and collaborating. So with that, that's where we are able to also look at internal operations to look at what would actually create an ideal user experience during deployment. Because if your newcomers and your various like staff is not well clued in, they'll actually leave a very bad impression on the external parties as well. So a lot of times people have asked, well, is this under customer experience discussion? Well, yes, I would say in general, this is what would actually also impact at the end of the day this experience that the client would feel because all the departments are interacting and engaging together. The commercial side is engaging the front line, of course, with the clients, but they're also engaging with internal stakeholders. So if our internal stakeholders do not have the right processes, do not have the right interactions or the experience, then it could also lead to a domino effect eventually. We just have not clued into where the red flag is yet. So that is what we are currently doing here. And with that, I must say that not all organizations are there yet when we talk about customer experience maturity and user experience maturity as well. So the good news is we are not alone in this journey. Like 80% of the companies or more than that is actually unaware of what is user centricity. They're still learning, they're still initiating just like us. And I believe many companies are also on that projection as well. So with that, what we are aiming for is that to learn and grow together and eventually to create that ideal experience, right, as much as possible so that we could create value and use that user-centric experience to get that buy-in from the clients that this product is really worth it, give us a great testimonial, advocate for us, and that's where the business will further expand and grow while our product and services make an impact for them as well. So I believe that I've covered quite a bit, and I would just maybe turn the mic over to Ryan if you are on the line, Ryan, to see if there's any questions from the audience, etc., that we can cover today.
Yes, thanks for the presentation, Caroline. Apologize that somehow my internet got stuck in, so I wasn't sort of in the room at the very beginning. But I suppose we are all having a good time from your presentations, and like all other sessions for all our live audience here today, please feel free to post your comments and feedbacks and questions here for Caroline. I'm pretty sure Caroline will be more than happy to answer those for you. We're just giving some time for our audience to put up some comments and feedbacks and questions. Thanks, Anna, for joining in with us. Thanks mainly earlier. I think I have someone from Chris. Thanks for the presentation, learned a lot. They currently survey for NPS quarterly, but would like to build out a better cadence. Do you have any tips on how they've handled surveys that can increase their response rate and got better valuable feedback Do you have some tips on this one?
Well, I have a thought actually, Chris, and I actually have a question for you would be, what is the team doing with the feedback you've gotten from the clients? Because a lot of time when we look at participation, right, and as people who participated in surveys ourselves, when we see there's value derived from the feedback that we give, we actually are more enthusiastic about giving it. And that whole publicity of what's being done with that feedback and that debrief, afterwards, if it's just a quick insights, after that, and that would actually go back to the client, just as a summary of, okay, because of that feedback, we're going to take into the consideration our roadmap for the product for next year. These are things that we're going to look into, so stay tuned. That would actually allow the clients to feel like, okay, you're not just gathering feedback for the sake of gathering feedback. You're actually doing something about my feedback. And they would feel more about like willing to engage. So I've seen, like, for example, companies like Coupa, other SaaS companies, they have their annual like product team conversations with key clients that they really set on the call. And on different days, right, each of the product team from different features would be with the clients on that call, that selected few clients. So we have what we call also customer advisory board for clients, right, who are really keen to partake in these conversations and who we recognize are actually power users for the products. So maybe you can give that a try. Feel free to drop me a note on LinkedIn as well, and maybe we can take it off from there too.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks, Chris. I think Chris just like have a follow-up comments on. I think the feedback they're getting is mainly back to the product team. But yeah, Chris, feel free to connect with Caroline over LinkedIn if you want some more follow-up conversation from there. And thanks, Kirby, for joining us again. Good to see you here again. So to share in our company when we have received negative NPS scores for the key customers, the CSM will actually reach out to the person to understand more. Although the NPS is somewhat of a KPI in his company, but it's not the primary KPI. Thanks for the comment, Kirby.
Mm. Right. And Kirby, that's actually quite true. NPS is like one of the key metrics, right? And I remember, over at Gartner, we used to do the surveys, and we have this team that would do a very comprehensive call to the client, a totally separate team, who will ask, like, what's the value you've derived from it? How would you describe that experience? How would you score it? And I remember that even if it's a 4 out of 5, the team would actually reach out to customer success and say, could you check on this with the client? So it's not just negative. They would like, as long as there's something that is the client is saying, oh, I'm not really that happy about it, we would still check it out. Because I think at the end of the day, we just want to validate just how important is that for the client. So in fact, like when COVID happens, right, and all the conferences, we had to suspend it. And one of the clients actually feedback and he said that, I actually subscribed to service because I got free ticket to the conference. I love your symposium. Like now that the ticket is not there, maybe I'll reconsider the purchase. And they're like, oh, okay, that's well, every client has different value points. So it's not norm, but we do also like, okay, what can we do about this situation, even if it's just one item and not the full suite of services that he has purchased. So definitely there's all that metrics and KPIs. It's just, we got to be a bit flexible about how we deal with it as well.
Yeah, thanks all for the comment, questions, and great answer, Caroline. Again, Kirby, totally agree with you on validation of the NPS. Anna here is wondering, could you talk a bit more about how you define metrics and KPIs?
Right. So, and just now in one of the earliest slides, I shared about how CSMs are overwhelmed with metrics, right? And yesterday during the panel discussion, I zoomed in on one very basic metric, and that's advocacy. But of course, not everyone can reach there because in order to get to advocacy, we have to do a lot of groundworks. So it's not ideal, but what we are seeing that very common now is that we are looking at engagement, right? The engagement of how often we are interacting with the clients. But what I really want to dive into and what I'm trying to change as well is that instead of just looking at metrics, we should actually look at how we are upskilling our CSMs. And reason why I'm saying that is that as a CS, professional, I transited from different industries, right, advisory to product, etc., and into tech. And there's always a steep learning curve. And right now, I'm in the real estate business of energy efficiency. So the first point of contact that I actually got last year was that I reached out to BCA to understand what the green plan is, how our technology fits into this, what is the industry lingo. And these are really expertise that we need to build and drive value with the clients, even though it's not part of the metrics. So what I've started out on the OKR, right, is that aside from all these engagement interactions, we should look at that scaling up. How could the CS actually be an expert on this domain, or at least understand enough so that we know how to drive value and recognize what the client is gearing for, right? So this, I would say it takes about 6 months to a year before a CSM can truly ramp up if he or she is transiting from another industry. So in between, we need a lot of support as well to help to gear on the industry knowledge about the product and the technology wise. So metrics wise, I would say that advocacy, as long as we are getting a like great testimonial feedback from the client, we are getting an engagement, that is the key metrics. Usage wise, it really differs from company to company because not every company is talking about usage, and adoption is of course a key criteria, but that oftentimes it would come about and lead to the way to advocacy as well if you are driving really good adoption within the company. So I know that it's still very high level. I wish I could have more time to go in depth, but and I hope that helps.
Thanks, Caroline. We can definitely talk about like a potential future session just on the metrics and KPIs and everything. I'm sure you got loads to share as well. We also have Wei Wang here. Thank you, Caroline, for the presentation. Currently, we are doing daily catch-ups, weekly follow-ups, MSRs, QBRs, MPS, CES, CSAT, and annual in-person catch-ups too. Each feedback are addressed swiftly by strategic actions. However, there are still like silent customers who are not that responsive to all customer success efforts above and eventually churn. We can address those who responded, but just curious from your end, would there be any other suggestions from your end to like boost the customer success for those silent customers? I think that was a great question.
Yep. And Weiwa, that is actually one of the typical hard not to crack, that kind of profile that we always see in the CS professions. And there's actually multiple reasons for why the client is silent. So we've seen it as well when it's a wrong sale by sales, right? It's a wrong sell. And that's where the client is like, I don't even want the product. I think it's been misrepresented. So I don't find value from the product. So that's where it's like during the onboarding phase, like we shouldn't really wait until the end of that life cycle, that 12 months, to try to find out like what is happening with this silent customer. If we are not able to engage them during that first 30 days, right? I think like red flags and bells are already ringing. So if we can't validate that this is a true client, and that's what we did at Garner as well, during that first 30 days, if the client is not responsive and we determine that it's actually a wrong sale product, so that's where we'll flag it up and say that, this is actually not the correct product. Should we try to look at if there's another suitable product for this client? Could we still switch it so that there's still value for the client for the rest of that 11 or 10 months, right? So we'll try to repurpose the product. And for this client, right, if it's still like silent after you want to try to reach out to them, to do the to validate what's wrong with it, then go back to sales, like who was the one who actually sold them the product and why, right? So we need to have that story. And in fact, I do encourage, like what we do in practice is that before a client comes live with us, there needs to be an internal prep discussion between account management or sales and customer success to understand that whole power map of who is actually doing the buy. Why is that person doing the buy? Who is the license going to? How are they going to utilize it? Is there some politics kind of struggle? Because all these dynamics can make it a tough renewal at the end of the year. So we need to be aware of what are the dynamics before we even go into the onboarding phase. And that would help to set us up for success and to mitigate all these red flags and silent customers. So, and if along the way, we are kind of stuck with this silent customer, then that's where one of the tricks that we used to do or tips is to make a hypothesis, right? Okay, whatever fact finding that we have, whatever profile that we have of this silent customer, make a hypothesis of what makes them tick, right? So these are kind of the engagements and what makes them tick, how does it relate back to our product or services, and sending them constantly these little valuable sources of information to say that this is how your peers are actually doing this, or to look at who is actually someone who's able to influence this silent customer within the organization, right? Have a coffee, together with this person. So there's multiple ways to try to like redefine this silent customer profile and mitigate it. But I would say that, in the first 30 days, if red flags are already there, do watch out for it.
Thanks, Caroline. That's a really thorough answer with details. We also got Kirby have a follow-up questions for you regarding what you and what Wei Wao just mentioned. Is that for some of their client customer, there are a couple of those who actually outsource their usage of the product. So even though the customer has paid a CS service, they have silent because these third parties are in between using our product instead of the actual customers. What are your thoughts around that?
Well, that's a great question, because then one of the things that I'd like to understand is also when you talk about outsource the usage together with the product, right? Is it part of a bundle, etc., that is part of your customer's product? That means your services together with this second party and they outsource to a third party. Is it like part of a whole package, right? Because at the end of the day, the person who's receiving this service, at the end of the day, the person who's using this, how is that third party actually utilizing and getting value out of it? Because it's like a B2B2C, right? In this way, not really. Okay, so I'm just reading his comments for context in the end. Okay,
let's wait for Kirby's response and then we can get back to it. Yeah, I mean, more than happy if Caroline's open up for LinkedIn connections. I can. How about by posting your LinkedIn URL if you want, Caroline? Would that work for you?
Sure. Always glad to be like just engage the CS community and learn from one another. Okay, so
their product is like
interesting.
self-service reporting, but the customer outsource it to third parties to build the report for them.
Right. So Kirby, then is their intention, because it sounds a little bit like a distributor kind of process, because one of the reasons why we are allowing such business model to happen is because this customer, it has a much wider network, right? That's why they're able to outsource to third parties to build the report. So that's why we're allowing this business model to take place. And because it sounds like that. And so what is the benefit of this business model we are getting out of it, right? Is this a business decision then? Because sometimes when we look at that whole customer journey, right, that whole like interactions and the business model, not everything is about CS or getting customer service as well. It's, well, you guess they're lazy. Could be, but it seems like maybe sales is actually saying, okay, distributor, able to sell it to a wider network to get sales and commission in, that's much easier. And then, so what happens is that, what is that commercial terms, right, with this customer? Because maybe there is a quota that they are hitting it together with your sales. That could be part of the reason why this business model is still happening, right? Right.
Oh,
yeah, vendor management. So yeah, so I think, Ryan, we have quite a lot of great comments.
And yeah, the customer needs to understand that theory and algorithms don't want to actually use the tool themselves, no matter how. Yeah, I think, yeah, it's, I don't know what to say.
Yes. So once again, right, coming back to, and I understand about the vendors management relationship and channel management relationship as well. So coming back to the end of the day, right? So when we look at, I came from a distributor background as well in my first job, and also with one of my advisory firms, right? We went into channel management and advisory for them also. So this is definitely one of the other pet topic, and we need to look at how that whole chain of service and product is, if it's not just stopping at that single next client, right? if it's a longer line down the chain. So if you're talking about, let's say, like Citrix, etc., the business model is going to be different because they would have the resellers in between, and we need to look at reseller support. And that's where yesterday we also talked a little bit around, like, is CS part of product? So what we are seeing is that some of the SaaS company, they actually offered CS as part of a product, which means that if they sell it off to the product to a reseller, let's say, or distributor, it's their choice to actually take on different kind of CS services. It can be platinum, bronze, etc. You have different tier of services. So you have different business structure out there. And at the end of the day, right, we need to look at that whole ecosystem, right, and what makes sense. So once again, I need to just highlight today's conversation is not just a one size fit all. It's always fluid. That's how the business world is. And we need to have a more detailed look at that whole ecosystem and where the value chain is.
Cool. Again, thanks for your answer, and then all those comments and everything. It seems that we don't have any further questions, and then again, I would like to say a big thank you to my speaker here, Caroline. Thanks for joining in. Presentation is great. The whole live Q&A is great. Thanks for all attendees tuning in live. I again apologize for being a bit late here, and then you managed it well, awesomely, Caroline. I didn't mean to be late at all. I look forward to meeting all of you in our next session. Right?
Thanks, Ryan, and thanks everyone for participating in this session, and thanks for your questions. Looking forward to connecting with everyone else offline. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone. Take care. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.